The Fall of Rome, a tragic end to an empire. Chapter 1. The Rise and Decline of Rome. At its peak, the Roman Empire was an unstoppable force, stretching from the cold plains of Britain to the scorching sands of North Africa. It had dominated the known world for centuries, enforcing its will through superior military strategy, economic power, and an unmatched political system. But even the mightiest of empires are not immune to decay. Rome, once the eternal city, would crumble under the weight of its own excesses, external threats, and internal strife. The question is, how did this happen? Chapter 2. The Rot Within, Corruption and Moral Decline. Rome's strength had always been its discipline, but as wealth poured into the empire, so too did greed. Corruption seeped into every layer of government. Senators auctioned off political positions to the highest bidder, emperors indulged in excessive luxury, and the once loyal Roman legions became mercenaries, loyal only to gold. The concept of Roman virtue eroded, replaced by decadence and hedonism. Meanwhile, the divide between the rich and the poor grew dangerously wide. The patricians, or noble class, feasted in grand villas, while the common citizens, the plebeians, struggled to afford bread. The government, in an attempt to keep the masses from revolting, introduced the infamous bread and circuses policy, free food, and grand gladiatorial games to keep the people distracted. But distraction is not a solution, and the cracks in the empire's foundation were growing. Chapter 3. Enemies at the Gates. The Barbarian Threat. While Rome indulged in its excesses, the empire's borders were under constant threat. Germanic tribes Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths were restless. The once mighty Roman legions were no longer invincible. Over-reliance on foreign mercenaries weakened the Roman military, and in 376 AD, the Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, entered Roman territory. Initially, they were allowed to settle peacefully, but mistreatment by corrupt officials pushed them to rebellion. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Alaric and his warriors marched into Rome and sacked the Eternal City. The world was in shock. Rome, which had once dictated the fate of nations, was now a vulnerable target. Though the Western Empire still stood, its days were numbered. Chapter 4. Economic Collapse and Military Decay. One of the greatest strengths of Rome was its economy, but centuries of mismanagement led to its downfall. Overtaxation drained the middle class, inflation spiraled out of control, and the value of Roman currency plummeted. Trade routes, once bustling with activity, became unsafe due to banditry and lack of military enforcement. The Roman economy, once thriving, now lay in ruins. To make matters worse, the military was no longer the formidable force it had once been. Roman soldiers were underpaid, undisciplined, and often deserted. The empire had become too reliant on hiring barbarian mercenaries, some of whom would later turn against Rome itself. Chapter 5. Political Chaos, Betrayals and Civil Wars. The Roman throne became a dangerous game of power, where assassination and betrayal were the keys to success. Between 235 AD and 285 AD, Rome had nearly 26 emperors, most of whom met violent deaths. Generals declared themselves rulers, leading to civil wars that weakened the empire further. One of the most infamous moments came when the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's supposed protectors, literally auctioned off the empire to the highest bidder. The once respected title of Emperor of Rome had become a mere prize for the strongest warlord. Chapter 6. The Last Emperor, the End of an Era. By the late 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was barely holding on. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, still stood strong, but Rome itself was doomed. In 476 AD, the final blow came when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a boy of just 16 years old. The empire that had ruled for over 1,000 years had fallen. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Rome, a World Forever Changed. Though the Western Roman Empire was no more, its impact on history is immeasurable. Roman law, architecture, language, and culture influenced civilizations for centuries to come. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, would survive for another 1,000 years, but the world had changed forever. The fall of Rome marked the beginning of the Middle Ages, a time of darkness, fragmentation, and new powers rising from the ashes of a fallen empire.